Yes! Welcome! Monday!
Happy Monday! With my best Kermit voice. Happy Monday, everybody!
How did you know I watched that film over the weekend with my daughter?
She told me.
Welcome to Chaps Many Cultures here for a Monday, episode 51. We're on the second side of our way to 100 and maybe many more. Who knows?
Yeah. I was doing the math. The 100 will be done by that before the end of the year if we keep it up like this.
Excellent.
Excellent. Marvelous. Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, very good.
We stay connected with each other.
We do stay connected. 50 episodes is a connection, is a wonderful connection. Somebody put on LinkedIn this morning, this is what we should all do. Connect with people, lift their passion, lift their love of what they do, share it, promote it, look after it, nurture it. It is what we need to do.
I like that. And I watched The Social Dilemma this weekend. If you haven't done so yet, folks, I guess it's a must watch. It's a wake-up call for some of you, probably. It was one for me. So let's connect and find ways to connect that doesn't always require the tools we're using now to broadcast. Or if we use these social media tools, let's be a little bit more cognizant in how we do that and maybe supplement it with other forms of connection that don't always require the data mining kraken that is Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram and what all the others are that we so readily and happily use because it's free. However, we're giving them our attention, aren't we? So as we are giving them our attention, we want to at least make it worth your while somebody else is piggybacking on our eyeball times. We're going to create some content that is actually worthwhile watching. Right?
Absolutely.
All right.
And to make it worthwhile watching, we want to bring on some people who actually can tell us about being connected. This is an important point, is that we could probably use some expert advice. And who better to do it than draw from our wonderful pool of global talent? And we have somebody in the wings right now. Please welcome Sue Shinomiya. Shinomiya-san.
Ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa. Hello, it's so good to see both of you, and
Guten
those
Tag.
of you who might be Guten Tag, yes. And good morning. For me, it's good morning. I'm in Portland, Oregon, so where it's very hazy still, the air quality is still bad. This has truly been a year of between the protests here, which you've all heard about, social unrest against for dismantling racism and the wall of moms and the tear gas and the pandemic and the masks and now we have this haze. I can't breathe takes on many meanings for us right now.
So what's good in your life, Sue?
What's good in my life is the moment to connect with fellas like you and to connect with this audience out here. I also watched The Social Dilemma this past few days, and I'm with you on that. We have to find these ways to really connect meaningfully and not have it be tied to scrolling and so on. And for me, let me give you my definition of connectedness. It's that sense of belonging and that sense of being joined or linked to something, of having an affiliation and really feeling close to something. And this has been really hard in this age. I mean, it was bad before because we were getting so polarized. And now it's even harder because we're in this social isolation stage or social distancing or physical distancing moment where we're not supposed to be near anybody and everything's being done virtually. And so you have to really, for me, certainly a little bit more intentional about, okay, if I can't necessarily connect with my friends and be in the same room, I can take any opportunity and grab it where I can be in the presence virtually. And events like this. On Saturday, there was that wonderful Tyagi workshop about live online activities. And it felt like a reunion of sorts of people from the Summer Intercultural Institute, of people in our professional society, of Society of Intercultural Educators, Trainers, and Researchers, and just from all around the world, and having those moments of something that you share that's really quite important in this era of disconnection.
I missed the Saturday event with Tyagi. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's
How good was it?
okay. Oh, it was great. We had, I think at the highest point, we had about 100 people on there. It was wonderful. And there were a few new names. I was really glad to see new people. But I was like so thrilled, people from really as far away as Morocco and as far away as Japan, and a lot of course, all over the US. So it was very good, especially in terms of the sense of how the two of them, Matt Richter and Tyagi, made us feel like we were kind of all engaged in the same activities and doing something, and in breakout rooms and saying hello. And when you can create a third culture almost in that moment of virtual, that's, I think, a really precious thing. And I've experienced that a few times with a few really excellent facilitators. So it's that part of it is wonderful. So that's, something, the learning, and we connect over learning and learning experiences. That's one, and professional development. That's two, and also our passions and our this movement that we're in for dismantling racism, or for just making the world a more social, just and green place. And those are also ways that we can connect, even if we're not in the same place.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a backstory. When I first met Sue, was in Portland. When I wandered aimlessly into a CETA USA conference that was going on in 2014, and because I didn't know anything about the organization, and I guess back then, and still as always, Sue is very deeply involved and serves that community in a very generous way. And I think you were one of the people that really impacted me. In terms of just the people that welcomed, it was a welcoming place immediately as soon as you walk in. I hear this from a lot of people in terms of CETA and the people around. When we get there, we kind of, because there's the people that do our same work, we get this sense of community and sisterhood and brotherhood, that we get. So, I mean, just a personal thank you for that. You're one of the reasons I still do that. I get to do this work, and I'm inspired to do it every day. But I think connectedness,
connect the thread.
Yes, I know. And I think that connectedness was always a theme that you always embodied. And I've seen you talk around the world, in person around the world, in different places, Dublin and Belgium and things like this. So I wanted to ask how much of this is influenced. Obviously, we opened up with a little bit of a Japanese reference. Obviously, people might look at that and what is that about? Obviously, the last name gives it away. But as somebody who's not probably knowledgeable in the Japanese sense of culture, is there a particular part of that influenced you to be interested in connectedness and the connectedness to nature or the connectedness to each other? Is that something that you discovered in the Japanese culture?
Oh, that is a precious and wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. As a matter of fact, when I really begin looking deeply at this word of connectedness and what it means, and looking at the neuroscience of it, and of course people like Brene Brown, who says that we are hardwired to have some kind of connection with other people, and of course I could not help but look at my Japanese culture side, and those of you who may not know me, I have spent about 10 to 11 years in Japan on the ground, but between the two countries, US and Japan, over the last couple of 30 decades, going back and forth and having one foot in both places at all times. Japan has a new prime minister today, for example. Did you know that? I don't need to talk about that. Yeah, I don't need to talk about that here, but Japan is always on there for me. I don't ever take my any part of me out of that country. And I wanted to show you this one little kanji that's here. That speaking of Japanese culture, of it's kizuna, and I started thinking in 2011 when they had the terrible earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear power disaster, and this term or this kanji of kizuna, they had it as their kanji of the year, and what that means is it's the one that touched more hearts in Japan. And the meaning of it is it's really interesting because the character is made up of a few parts, the two halves that are tied together with a thread to unite and make one whole, and is translated as bond or close ties. And in the case of Japan, it was specifically around how unbelievably touched they were that so many people came from around the world to take care and help take care of Japan after that terrible disaster. They didn't expect that. They were not really assuming that. And yet that's what happened. And for them, it was deeply moving in a culture where there's a lot of insider, outsider, and, you take care of the people who are in your in-group, but the people in your out-group, they may or may not take care of you. And it's not their obligation to do so. So I was thinking about that a lot. And yes, there are a lot of so many expressions in Japanese that are around how you read the room. It's like there's even a word, kuki o yomeru, which is like read the air. And can the person read the air? Can you understand from the surroundings around you what's going on, as opposed to exactly what people say or what's written down and so on. And there's like 100 different expressions in Japanese that would imply this kind of connection that's beyond just what you say and what you have written down or what your graphic is about, although, definitely for a pictograph-based language, images are going to be a lot more important even than they are in particularly Western culture. So yeah, there's an awful lot of influence coming from my Japan side about that. And that as a parent, for example, you bring up your child in such a way that they are interdependent with others. In my U.S. culture, I was brought up to be, you got to get out there, you got to be independent, you got to make your own money in the world. My mom was interesting about that. She grew up in a kind of precarious family situation, said, you can't depend on a man for your income. So I grew up with okay, I got to have my own income, I got to make my own way in the world. Whereas Japan, it's often, yeah, you got to be independent to some extent. In fact, they send their kids off on the bus from age 6 or the train at age 6. But there's also a sense of you have to get along with others. You really have to pay attention to what's going on around you and who's around you and how you're treating them.
I'm curious because as you'll find out now, I did a lot of Netflix watching this weekend. So I watched an episode of a Netflix production called Chef's Table, and it's about this Japanese American chef. She's a female. She's the youngest daughter in the family who's been brought up to not strive for professional excellence. That's for the oldest son or for the sons in the family. So she was still raised with traditional Japanese values, and she defied all of these in her, let's say, Japanese American upbringing, striving for individual independence and self-actualization, right? And yet she is now the chef, the head chef, and I think the sole proprietor of a LA-based Japanese restaurant where she celebrates this connectedness, this interconnectedness of her restaurant with her guests, with her what's a better word for a restaurant guest? I keep forgetting. Patrons, right? So she keeps her restaurant staff keep meticulous record of who comes to the restaurant, what do they eat, and when they ate what in which course sequence. So they keep records of that. So when these people come back and make a reservation, the chef already knows they had this and that last time. So I'm preparing a special menu for them when they come in next time. So she connects with her predominantly West Coast American patronage in a way that is not very American. So I'm curious. So you've been spending one foot planted on each side of the Pacific, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
How do you balance this U.S. individualistic, self-actualizing, independent side of yourself with the connectedness that is on a well, on a deeper level in Japan that is often not visible to the eye for individualistic North Americans who simply are not trained or we're not raised to read the air in a room, or we're not raised to pick up on the energy in the space that they occupy. How do you balance these two, and how can we do that? How can I learn from that?
Oh wow, that's very deep.
Yeah, I
Well,
thought you did away easy here.
I guess
This
there's
is just
a
what you wanted on a Monday morning, isn't it?
oh man. Well, because it's something that has been my life journey in a sense of the things that I love. Some of the things that I love about my other culture, my Japanese side, my Japanese culture, is that interdependentness, and some people call it mindfulness, but I think that gives it too much positivity or almost a mystique that may or may not be there. And this is why I always invite people to, learn from me a little bit more deeply about Japanese culture and what their mindfulness means. Because for Japanese people, they often see the independence as being very sticky, and you have obligations to people, and you have to be really cautious about whether you are going to step on somebody's toes or not. And there is a lot of reading the room. And if you've been in a room with Japanese people in a meeting, for example, you will notice that there's not a lot of people jumping up and saying, "Oh, this is what I think," and your idea is stupid, and that there's not that contradicting and debate style that comes up, because there is this. At least not necessarily harmony as in we're all going to sit around the room and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It's not that kind of harmony. The harmony is more of appearance of things going smoothly. Mm-hmm. You don't air your dirty laundry in public. If Brett and I, we're going to argue about something after this thing, and I'm going to go with you and get offline and do that. Not, Christian around, we want to make sure we're kind of looking like things are going really well and really smoothly, especially if Christian is my customer. And I'm glad you brought up this term of patron or customer, because there's also the hierarchy in the society of how you elevate the customer, and okyakusama wa kami-sama, which means the customer is like a god. And this is Shinto gods, and there are 8 million of them, so that you don't get freaked out that it's the god, but that you treat your customer, put them on a higher level, and then you have a different way of communicating with your peers, and different way of communicating with somebody who might be not lower than you as in lower status, but somebody you have to take care of, if you see what I mean. It's a different way of seeing the world. So that, to reconcile with my Western side of, in my Americanness of, in my MBA, going out there, go for it, and show your confidence. And I think this is another area that's really interesting for me, is there's so much in your giving a first impression in the US that's about showing your confidence, and I'm the competent one, and I'm the one who's the right person to be here, the expert on the subject. And you got to turn that around a little bit if you're going to make a good impression in a culture like Japan, where it's more, who do you know, what's your relationship, and do you have a sense of modesty, even, humbleness. And maybe I'm going to let Brett introduce me instead of me introducing me, so that I can not be so in your face, self-selling. So that's and how do we do this? How do I reconcile the two of them? I think it's ongoing. It's kind of like I can't multitask, really. I mean, I could try, but it's sort of fake. But when I go into my Japanese mode in a moment where I need to tap into that mindfulness. And I find that if we're going to talk in a little bit about what are things you can do, but mindfulness training, meditation, that kind of thing, to make me help me breathe and slow down and stop and be more aware of my surroundings, can really help with that. And for my Japanese colleagues and clients and so on, having them be a little bit more self-introspective and like, what's good for me? What do I really want? What are my achievements? I ask, often especially when I'm working with young people in Japan, students, for example, and I'll ask them, so what have been your achievements so far, so that they can get this idea about how to do a good job interview, or what to put on their resume. And they won't be able to think of a thing. And it's not because they haven't had any achievement. It's just they just don't think that way. They haven't been brought up to feel that my achievements are something as more special than the achievements I made with different teams and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's widen the scope a little bit then. I mean, even though we're talking here about the relationship between Japanese and Western cultures, I think that how can we encourage other people to do the same thing in no matter what culture they're from? You know, I mean, we can talk about this in terms of understanding of others, understanding of other cultures, faith practices, things like this. Is they're keeping an open mind. Now we've lost the racist already. So they're gone. I mean, they're living their hateful life, and they're happy to it. That's fine. Well, they're welcome to it. But the people that are on the edge, the people that are going, I have some fear, and I have some people that say that too. I have fear of people that I don't know and I don't understand, a culture that I don't understand. Then is there a way that we can use that wider scope of practicing mindfulness, if you call it that, or connectedness, to actually be curious? And you use this very important word of humility, of humbleness, right? And we talked about self-knowledge on Friday, right? Understanding where you're coming from as a journey of introspection and self-reflection, to then leverage your curiosity to understanding people that, quite frankly, is it understandable that there might be other ways of life that you're fearful of, but you don't know it and you don't understand the details. So therefore, does that help you cross the bridge? I don't want to, preempt your answer, but that's kind of where I'm going with that, in terms of how can you apply what you're talking about in relation to these two cultures to a wider scope for people.
Yeah, that's a real big challenge right now, isn't it? I look to people like the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Prime Minister Ardern, and I've been following her since she started. And she became Prime Minister while she was pregnant, and she went ahead and did it anyway. So talk about, she defied these stereotypes and what you are, breaking out of the box from the get-go. But it made her really human, and she brought her baby and I guess breastfed it or something at the United Nations meeting. And then they had that awful scenario, the terrorist attack. And I think something that she said, and I know she was talking about the Muslim community in New Zealand, but she had that sort of a motto or a kind of call to action that there is no us and them, they are us. And I try to put that in the back of my head, even in the most polarized scenario of, they are us. And if I don't, and this includes the people who are on, quote unquote, the other side, whether it's a political spectrum or a different culture or so on. And where is that kind of common humanity? And I think there's something in, I know there's a lot of insider outsiderness for Japanese culture that we don't even have in the U.S. The U.S., we see that everybody is potentially an American citizen, and the world is us somehow in a weird, interesting way. But I think there's something about the interdependentness or interconnectedness, the connectedness of all of these things, that we can't parse them out. And that'd be something I'd want people to learn about Japanese culture, is, how things are seen as being all a part of one bigger picture, and that this affects this, affects this, affects this. And if I give you a tiny example, I was following the Japanese news when we were having these smokes and these fires and everything over here in the US, and watching the Weather Channel of all things. And they were talking about how, so the smoke that we're having today is because of the typhoon that they had in Japan. Let me explain that the water was really hot in the ocean, creating this super typhoon, and the super typhoon didn't really have anywhere to go. It sort of missed Japan, it hit Korea, but that typhoon was so huge that it upset the jet stream, and the jet stream kind of went up and down and grabbed something from the Arctic, which meant there was snow in Colorado, but it pulled something out of the very hot air from the south, which meant that we had this awful hot wind, and everything just blew up in terms of the fire. So now we're getting the smoke. So that would be that's like every day in Japanese news, that there's this, we're going to show you the bigger scientific picture here so that you get an understanding of what's going on. And I wish that, more of our culture could have a little bit more of that. We are really all connected on this global level. But yeah, how do I get the people
looking at the wholeness of a phenomenon rather than on the symptomatic eruption, so to say?
Yeah, they would look at that too, but they would often start with that bigger picture of, and the science, and trusting in the science of it. So you can kind of get this objective third place to go. So you're not like in blaming someone or something else.
No,
I think that
no, isn't it always the butterfly's fault? That butterfly that flaps its wings and causes the hurricane on the other side of the world?
That was what I was thinking of. Was there a butterfly that flapped in the ocean, and now we're having, and now I have to wear my mask inside my house.
I should be getting money from Netflix soon because I'm going to mention another Netflix show. It's called
Netflix.
It's called Connect. I think it's called Connected. I'm just thinking of it now, where they explain these global phenomena, like you just did with the weather phenomena. There's one episode on that. It's a documentary show where they show how some kind of decaying organism in the West African desert gets picked up by the South Saharan storms, and it crosses the Atlantic, where it then creates rain and weather patterns over the Amazon and over North America. And if the animals hadn't died a million years ago in the Sahara Desert, then this specific particle would not be in the air and we wouldn't have certain weather phenomena. So everything is connected, and our quote unquote Western culture tends to focus so much on the episodic or anecdotal in the moment story that is the news cycle for today, and often neglects that there's a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere that is connected to us. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but it's easy in our Western world with the way we consume media and the way we consume information to lose sight of the connection, right? And I recognize it for myself. It is sometimes it takes computing power. It takes brain power to remind myself that there are other things that are relevant in this context, and I must not just focus on the episode or the symptom, but go for the root cause. Cause. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah.
The root cause. There is a core somewhere else.
There's a core.
Yes, and I think there is something in Japanese culture that, because they are a culture that has been faced with, this small, precarious, resource poor island that has the typhoons coming along, and we know about the earthquakes and tsunamis and floods and all kinds of natural phenomenon that has a great impact on the society. So they know that they're surrounded by that, and always have a sense of, okay, what's my contingency plan? And all of these things are going to be connected, especially global warming. They have a very different approach to global warming. They feel like it's happening over them, and that it impacts them, and that Japan is getting hotter. And I think that it is. Every summer seems to be hotter than the last one. And so there's a different, just sort of overall sense. And I think in the US we parse it out and somehow have it be a part of an ideology that, and there's not if we've come to a place where there are different versions of science or alternative facts, then it makes it a lot harder to have a sense of that commonality. And also, I think that siloing, I saw a comment here about that I think Antimo put up about the news that we get in this culture is often, of course, I really like totally appreciating the local news right now, because I need to know what my air quality index is in my neighborhood if I possibly can. But we don't necessarily get a global picture, and not very often, and only if there's some event. And it's sort of shaded by whoever is on the news and their own opinion. I've taken to watching more public broadcasting so that I get at least some objectivity. I kind of miss that the news used to be reported as news. And that might impact, this, going back to this first point that Christian made about our affinity and our tendency to be on the media, which is unfortunately, picks up on our logarithms and feeds us and continues to feed us the stories that it thinks we will stay on and stay on longer. And those are the stories we might agree with, rather than, although I don't know, if you get stories that you disagree with a lot of the time, that there's something to be said about that too. But we don't get we're getting bits of a picture, not all of the whole picture. And
right.
yeah.
Well, Sue, we got a comment here from Brent in Toronto. He asks he'd like to hear your thoughts on managing internal teams comprised of newcomer immigrants from multiple cultures. What have you seen about how the approach changes depending on where the corporate headquarters is? So I think that's a broad and multifaceted question. However, I think you may have some answers as to whether we're talking about a Japanese headquartered organization or a U.S. headquartered organization. How's been your experience around this?
Oh my, and I've got two other experts on this subject, so we know that where the headquarters are can shape something about the assumption or the know-how or how we do things around here, the corporate culture, for sure. It's an interesting question because, for example, there was a time when I was working with companies that were in nuclear power. And it was very hard to figure out where the headquarters were because it was bought by this country and then it went to another country and then it was over. And you'd think there's something with nuclear power that you'd have a better sense of where it's coming from, because that's dangerous. And it's, there's a lot of proprietary stuff, secret information, whatever. But actually that industry is very globally fluid. So, maybe you go back in the history of the company and try to see who was the founder and how did that influence it. I always look to that, and especially if I'm working with someone who is either being, in a joint venture or something with a Japanese company, you got to know something about the history of the Japanese company and how far back does it go? Is it one of the original Zaibatsu, the companies that were around since the Meiji era, or is it something that's been invented really recently and is not maybe beholden to the same kind of old norms, etc. I think that's really important, and I think there's definitely an influence. But that's a really big question that Brent had that could be a whole other topic.
Yeah, we could talk about this for a week. I do want to share an example though, real quick, Brent, on that very question. Last week I completed a training. Well, it's not complete yet, but I'm training a global executive who happens to be German, and he works for a German headquartered organization, and he's been promoted to a general manager position in one of their outlying markets. And I asked him a similar question. And I said, well, how are you handling yourself as a German leader in another country? And how have you decided which language to use? Is the corporate language German? Is it English, or is it something else? And he gave me an example of how they prepared a presentation for their team locally. And he and his intern worked on that presentation. And then when they were done with the slide deck, he looked at his intern, who happens to be from Egyptian background and who doesn't speak German at all. And they realized, oh, dang it, we created an English language slide deck for a German speaking team. What are we going to do? Are we going to translate that? Nah. We're going to use the English slides and we're going to present in German as much as required and as English as necessary if we need to. And long story telling, or for me, my takeaway was it takes a leadership position to decide how am I going to integrate newcomer immigrants in my multicultural internal teams. How am I going? That was Brent's question. How do I integrate that? It depends on what the leadership does. I think any type of diversity, inclusion, equity within an organization starts at the top, no matter how hierarchical your culture, no matter how hierarchical your organization is, or how matrix and egalitarian it is. However, there's a nominal leader who often sets the agenda. And I think it often starts with that individual. That would be at least my most recent experience around that question. I hope that answered it, Brent. So here we have Patricia asking or telling us the headquarter location for all cultures is key to smooth communication and collaboration with global teams, mainly based on corporate culture.
Yeah. And local culture.
Oh, and local culture. All right. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could talk about this for a
personal note too from Patricia.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And also Kieran. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. There is something to be said for, what is the, the head person, their culture, etc. But I think there needs to be somehow, I don't know if it's a chip we can put into them about the value and importance of inclusiveness. Recently, in the inclusiveness conversation, I've noticed there's a lot of talk about belonging. I had a little bit of resistance to that idea of belonging. It's just kind of like master, belonging, slave. I mean, is there any potential carryover from previous history? But since I'm hearing it from people who are really deeply rooted in the diversity, equity, and inclusion, a mindset, then I think it's okay. But you can't just say, okay, this is my culture, and make it go, here, this is my style. You first of all have to have self-awareness. This is my style. This is how I do things around here. And it's not just everybody, the multicultural, the immigrants who might be coming into my organization. If I really want them to feel valued and feel comfortable and feel like they have something important to contribute, I'm going to have to convey that to them, that their ideas, their opinion counts. And it's okay if it comes at me in a way that is different from what I grew up with, or in a format that might be different. I have to be much more tuned into different possibilities, different styles, different ways of getting at a good answer, getting at a solution to a problem, and not just assume that my way is, or the highway. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And that's what, kind of getting a sense of connectedness with that human being, so that, and they get it. It's about, we look at leadership and authenticity. That's a whole other arena to talk about how are we true to ourselves, and yet how do we adjust to the environment that we're in the world around us, and the cultures that we are in communication with.
Yeah, I think that I always suggest to a leader that they do have those conversations, right? Direct conversations with the new team that they arrive in a country and they've got people who don't know that person, is to honestly sit down with them and say, the program that we might do with them might give them some of that self-awareness, and they have some self-realization about their style. And so they're able to go to these people and say, hey, look, I know what my style is. And I know how it can potentially perhaps put you off or be uncomfortable for you.
Okay, in your face.
Right, absolutely. And I want to be aware of that. And so that just opens up a whole new conversation from the get-go, especially when it's a manager-subordinate type of relationship. If you come with that type of open humility, again, we're getting back to humility and self-awareness, right? It's that's an important thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So connectedness, if I can sort of bring it back to that too, you were talking about the self-awareness and the introspection part of it, and I know that really has helped me to be taking, I think you had Rita Werbler on here a little while ago, and Yuko Danuv, and several others who are more, and Saskia, who are looking at the mindfulness piece of it. And the more we do as individuals, and especially in a time when we have a little bit more time space, if you will, if you have a moment every day that you can kind of stop. And of course, right now I feel kind of, it's dangerous to breathe deeply, but once this air clears up, to breathe, and to even something as simple as you're breathing, just like, okay, slow down for a minute. What outcome do I really want to have in any situation that I'm in today? Or just at the end of the day, how do I want to feel at the end of the day today? And if I can stop and realize, okay, well, maybe my way of doing things and my agenda isn't pushing that, getting in people's faces, as I said, isn't going to be the way that gets that done. And we work with this large volunteer organization, CHR USA, and I'm not paying anybody to do stuff for us. I need to connect with them and to have show them, bring their value into our picture, and let them know that that's what's precious here. We want them to be part of this incredible community that we have. And that's one way to express it, is bring your talent to us and express it in that way. And if it gets you some, a connection to a job or a gig or with a client or something at some point, or to your students or something else, fantastic. But think about how we are creating this community of connected leaders, of mindful leaders, of culturally competent and intelligent leaders, and that includes us as leaders.
Right. I think also just on the CETA side of it, I mean, these are where that's a great organisation. There's many around the world, and these are, again, volunteer organisations where people serve and give their time, but also ensuring that these organisations in and of themselves don't suffer from their own insider outsider dynamic as well. So that part of that invitation, and it's kind of I'm struggling with that. You know, who are we to invite people in? Should be their space. The door. It's not for us to open the door when we see fit. I mean, it should be a space where people can come and share even uncomfortable topics, difficult topics about how they feel connected or disconnected to an organization like that or other organizations, and bring that openly and honestly, and have us just listen and make sure that they're a part of if they want to be, they're a part of the process of adjusting, or is it incumbent on us of the insider to do that changing in and of ourselves? So it's a difficult machination, but I think it's a great point you bring up about that volunteer type of side of things.
Yeah, I think this is where, I call myself a budding Buddhist because I feel like I'm always learning new religions and learning from different spiritual traditions and so on. But one thing that I really appreciate about Buddhism is seeing the world as a mirror for yourself. And if this is my mirror and I see ugly things in it, it's like, all right, how is that reflecting something in me? And what can I do about me? I can't do anything about those other people if they're other people, but I can see that oneness in all of us, and I can do something here that will make at least this moment, not even today, a better day. If I could just have this minute be a good one for me, I'm doing all I can, So I think that's the preciousness of feeling that connectedness with self. I guess I wanted to get back to that. It starts with connectedness with self, really, and then you can get that connectedness with family, connectedness with the community, connectedness with beyond the community, and then understanding, as I said, that they are us and that we're all on the same planet. We better figure it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you having a wonderful moment right now?
Oh, I absolutely am. I love being with you too, and I love being with whoever has come on today, and the people that will come on later who will watch it, asynchronistically. And I'm looking forward to bigger connections with the upcoming conferences and opportunities. There's a CTAR Japan thing coming up. There's a CTAR USA thing coming up, and I think that Patricia was mentioning the self-care and. Let's make sure we're taking care of all of these things.
We had some great comments here coming in here today. Big shout outs to everyone watching either on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Stay faithful to the two chaps and our more awesome guests. And Sue, this was awesome. Thank you for taking time. I love this stuff. I feel connected.
No, that's great. All right, put your hand out to one side, and then put
one?
your hand down to the other side, and we'll all hold hands for a moment.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
There you go. I can't line it up.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, and I always like to remember it's not the journey is. Of course, right now we're all at home, whatever. So the journey is not in going to another country. The journey is in seeing the country that you're in with a new set of eyes.
Look at that. Now, can you say that in Japanese, please?
No.
Come on. No pressure.
But we had one of the commenters make a comment in German. See, there was somebody. Allison, Dankeschön, schönen Tag.
Thank
Auch
you
einen schönen Tag an euch alle. And I can't help but notice your calendar image back there, Sue, looks a lot like Neuschwanstein.
It is. That was for you.
What about my Australian? Where's something for Australia? I know, right? Oh,
I should have that. I should have thought
Don't you have castles in Australia? No?
Yeah, we have castles. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, you do. You have ancient castles, things like Uluru. It's like
Uluru, yes,
a fortress to the gods, right? It's amazing.
There we go.
They're just a little older than the ones you have, Christian.
It didn't make it in your calendar. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's probably in there. But, yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy your
Thanks,
days.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.